Hello and welcome to the Wellness Plus podcast. I'm your host, Karina Rachel, and I'm joined today by Chandra Nelogal. He is a yoga instructor, and he's here to talk to us about the traditional history of yoga. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for welcoming me.
Yes. Can you just start by giving a bit of background into how you became interested in yoga and maybe what drew you to this practice?
Got it. So I started doing just regular attending yoga classes while I was in high school in India. And I kind of continued it on throughout my engineering education. And for a few years, there was a pause when I went into profession.
Wow.
And I moved to US. And then again, I came in contact with a yoga instructor up in Boston area. And that's where I restarted my classes.
Mm-hmm.
And he encouraged me to pursue the yoga instructor certification course. So I did that course, got my certification, and was teaching for a bit there. And then I moved to Austin. I continued the teaching at Chinmaya Mission. And I've been teaching for a while now, like a little bit more than 10 years.
Wow. So when you say that you began taking yoga classes in high school, is it part of the curriculum, like required curriculum to take yoga? Or is that something that you kind of were able to seek out on your own?
It was outside of the class, outside of the school system. It was on my own.
And then can I ask maybe what drew you to yoga classes as a teenager?
Yeah, it was primarily encouragement from my grandfather. He just wanted me to have some regular physical activity. Mm-hmm. And that kind of what started that.
Right. And then kind of moving to the other end of the spectrum, studying engineering. You mentioned you even have some inventions and some patents in that area.
Yes. So I've been working as an engineer for nearly 20 years now.
Wow.
And I do have like 12 plus patents right now, mostly in the area of data storage. I work for a big data storage company here in town. So.
Wow. And then you're still teaching yoga now here in Austin.
Yes, that's correct.
Cool. Can you talk about maybe how your yoga practice works in balance with this career in a very high-tech industry?
Yes. So yoga practice definitely helps me, kind of bring the awareness to the practice, bring awareness to the spiritual growth. That part is fairly important to me, and
right.
Yoga practice has really helped me with that.
Right. Here in the West, we have really embraced yoga so much over the last few decades, and it's something that has just been more and more introduced to the mainstream. But I'm interested to hear your perspective, having been originally introduced to yoga in India. How is it different, the way that we practice yoga here in the West, or the way that it's presented?
Not too much of a difference from a class setting to class setting point of view. Not a whole lot of differences, except in India, most of the teachers, the names of the postures are called out in Sanskrit. Mm-hmm. There is a little bit more usage of kriyas, as in the cleansing techniques. Like, for example, if you are in a class, like maybe once a month, they might do a kriya, which is like a cleansing technique, on a weekend. But in the West, it's more you have to sign up for a course like that, rather than it's not part of a regular curriculum. But from a class to class and in a class setting, the practice is fairly similar. But obviously the naming is slightly different, the pace, the different styles of practices. You have various styles of teaching and various styles of practices. So they are slightly different in that way.
Right. And then, in in the West, you'll often find all of these kind of different areas of yoga, the Bikram, Ashtanga. There's very many different kind of segments, so to speak, where yoga has kind of branched off and different teachers have maybe developed their own style. Mm-hmm. Is that something that they also have in India, where there's kind of these many different branches? Or is it...
Definitely. There are multiple branches of yoga. I mean, branches, I wouldn't say branches, kind of different set of practices, right? There are schools like that, and they subscribe to slightly different philosophy or methodology of practicing the yoga. Mm-hmm. But most of them trace the origins back to like Patanjali Yoga Sutras, which are the, I would say like a syllabus or a curriculum that was compiled and set around, like, I don't know, maybe 300 to 200 BC.
Wow.
In that time frame, that was when it was compiled. And most of the practices do trace back to the principles laid down in the sutras.
Right. Can you maybe give us a overview of those original sutras?
Sure. So, most of the yoga teachers and practitioners, they sometimes there is chanting about Patanjali. Mm-hmm. He's well known to be a sage. He lived in India. Date is very difficult to pin down, but sometime between 300 BC to 200 BC. That's supposed to be his time when he was working. Mm-hmm. And what he did is there were multiple ways of practicing yoga, and what he did is he compiled all the practices as a set of curriculum. You can say it's not like a shloka or something. It is meant for chanting. It is more like very dense aphorisms, like a one sutra or a one aphorism can be just 3 words long, but he packs in a lot of dense words, which each word may have a lot of hidden meaning, and he would say this is what it is. So that's how he compiled it. Mm-hmm. He compiled it in really 4 quadrants or padas, and the first is very high level, very for a person who has realized. Like it's called Samadhi Pada, which is, the person has realized and this is what realization might look, or these are the obstacles for realization, and that's how he starts the sutras. The second quadrant or the second pada is the sadhana pada. That's where he gets into how do you practice yoga. And there again, a lot of it's about 50 plus sutras, and the total is about 196, out of which roughly around 48 to 50 is how they are divided. Mm-hmm. And in the second quadrant, the sage talks a lot about the difficulties of doing the practice, what are the different variations in mind that can happen, and what are the obstacles or how you can be delusioned into doing the wrong practice. And then towards like shloka in year 20s, he starts describing what is a asana, and what are the different 8, the Ashtanga yoga that you mentioned. It's actually 8 limbs of yoga, 8 rungs of yoga, and he starts mentioning them, and he starts going deeper into explaining what each one of them is.
Wow. Here oftentimes it is a physical goal that maybe brings someone to yoga. So they want to get more flexible, or they want to lose weight or something like this. In the West, I feel there's a very physical focus, at least initially what may draw someone into yoga. But is the physical practice or the physical benefits, is that really the core of yoga, or?
Well, again, originally the way the sage Patanjali compiled it, and various other yoga masters have practiced, it is meant to be a preparation for your higher level practice. In fact, for a asana, which is in a typical yoga class, people spend significant amount of time doing various different postures and asanas, and out of the 196 sutras, only 3 sutras are dedicated for asana.
Wow.
And the one line definition is whatever is stable, whatever is comfortable is an asana. That's all the definition is.
Wow.
So yoga, if you want to go back, what is yoga? It is to self-realize, to yoke your consciousness with the supreme consciousness. Depending on different styles of philosophy, right?
Right.
You can say it's a method or a set of practices to realize oneself, or to realize that you are part of the supreme consciousness, a divine being, whatever you may call. Different schools of philosophies have different way of doing it, and yoga was a means of doing it, or is a means of doing it, and that is how the practice is compiled and originally talked about.
Right.
And then the physical benefit, to your point, there is a lot of set of practices and asanas and preparation for it helps with a lot of physical benefit. There is a lot of physical benefit, and then all the breath control or pranayama also helps with a lot of physical benefit, physical, mental benefits, and that is definitely a great gift, right? And there is nothing wrong in focusing on that and getting the benefit of that, but in the bigger picture of yoga, that is a part of it. So you prepare yourself with your conduct and observations to be able to do the asanas and the pranayama, and you start to withdraw from your sensual pressure things. Then you are focusing on your own mind and start to meditate more deeply. So that's the 8 limbs of yoga are spread out in that manner. You can even think of them as hierarchical.
Interesting. So you said that there's 196 sutras,
Yes.
and only 3 that are actually related to the physical movements,
Yes.
or moving through postures.
Yes.
Can you talk about maybe some of the others?
Yes. So again, I mentioned about first quadrant, second quadrant. The third and the fourth quadrant are also, especially the fourth quadrant, again talks about. It's called Kaivalya Pada or Kaivalya Quarter, and it also talks about the practices, the challenges, and the feelings of a person who is self-realized. So the first and the fourth quadrant really talk about very high level for a person who is self-realized or who has accomplished a lot in his spiritual pursuit. That's where it focuses on. The second quadrant is where a lot of these Ashtanga yoga is laid out there.
Right.
The 8 limbs, which are the yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. The first 2 are yama and niyama. You can't really constrict them in a yoga class. You can't do that in a class, because it's about yamas are your own practices. Like it says, you shall be non-violent, you shall be truthful.
Right.
For example, right, and you won't steal anything from anybody. So those are your core observations, and you do it yourself. And then the second one, niyama, is again for your own self-control or practices, right?
Right.
Something are, okay, you shall be clean, you shall be content, and happy. So those are beyond the scope of a yoga class.
Right.
And then the third and the fourth, asanas and pranayamas, those are the practices. Asanas are, in fact, all the physical postures and the movements to keep your body in a healthy enough state so you can sit long for your meditation practices. It's a preparatory thing, right? And then pranayama is all about breath control and using different techniques to calm down your breath. And the sutras go a little bit deeper into pranayama, where it says the exhalation shall be longer than inhalation, and a successful pranayama practice would result in slower rate of breathing for a good practitioner.
Right.
So it goes into that.
Right. I think so much of the ability of a yoga practice to kind of calm those sensations of stress or anxiety that, our culture kind of is very, very heavy in those things. It's always fast-paced. Everything is very much, I feel, in a kind of race against time. And what that creates for, those of us living in this culture is, those kind of physical things like maybe increased blood pressure or just increased stress, always being in that physical sympathetic state or the fight or flight state. So I think that the element of the pranayama and the asana that so many of us here in the West, or maybe just kind of in those two sutras when we go to yoga class, we've been able to receive so much just from those simple elements.
That's correct.
Then to kind of understand yoga in the context that, these are just two of those 8 branches or 8 limbs of yoga, that there's so much more that this practice has to offer.
Definitely, yes.
That maybe if we've received so much just in these 2 sutras, these 2 limbs, that to be able to, open up into these other parts of the practice and embracing that more traditional sense of yoga, we're able to receive so much more than we've already gained.
Definitely. I mean, as I said, right, I mean, you nailed it, actually. The definition of yoga is to kind of reduce the unnecessary activity of mind. That's how the sutra starts. That's the first sutra.
Right.
Yoga chittavritti nirodha, right? But the whole rest of the sutras really get you towards that goal. Being one's self-realization, that's what it is all driving towards. And then, it discusses a whole lot of other tangential things that may happen. Different kleshas are talked about, how people can get delusion. People can, while in the path of a spiritual pursuit, their intention may be they want to really pursue spiritual goal, but they may get distracted. They may encounter some other modifications.
Right.
So all those things are talked about. And as I was talking about earlier, the yamas and niyamas, the 5 yamas and the 5 niyamas are just preparatory things which in and of themselves can reduce a lot of stress from one's life. Right? If you are, stealing is not in a gross sense, right? It's not only, nobody robs a bank, but it's not in that sense. It is, did you steal somebody's idea, somebody's credit, your speech? Did you attribute something to yourself, right? Which you didn't probably was not the original claimant, right? So the installation of the practice completely towards one's life, in their speech, in their actions, in their thought, that is what will prep somebody for a spiritual pursuit, a higher level of spiritual pursuit. And that is an important part of the yoga practice, as much as an asana practice or a pranayama practice. You're right. You absolutely captured it very well.
Can you talk a little bit about maybe some of the delusions or distractions that can come up when we're on the spiritual path?
Well, I mean, to an extent, right? Again, just to, one thing I forgot to start off with is both the Patanjali Yoga Sutras knowledge I have on any other spiritual practice, it is not my knowledge. It is, I attend Chinmaya mission here, and there is a monk who explains it very well, and I learn a lot from him. He's very knowledgeable. And, I listen to some other discourses over the period of time, and it is whatever I've gathered from somebody else. It is not mine, first thing. Yes, so from a distraction point of view, at least in the Yoga Sutras, they talk about distractions or kleshas. 4 kleshas are talked about. Mostly all are around you are pursuing a practice. Maybe you are not really, you don't have the discriminating intellect yet, right? You don't know what is a long-term beneficial thing from a practice point of view versus a short-term beneficial thing from a practice point of view. Maybe you are too pursuant on one of the aspects and not the other. Maybe you are not balanced, right? That's one of the kleshas talked about. So overall, you may be too much emotionally, involved with pursuit of a goal, like maybe your career, or involved with a family member, something like that. That can be a klesha, right? So many things like that are talked about. And also during the practice, for example, it kind of, as I said, it kind of goes about like a hierarchical practice. So yama and niyama prep you. Asana and pranayama prep your body and your breath and your mind. And pratyahara is you withdraw your senses from too much engagement into sense activities, right? For example, you want to eat good food, you want to see nice things, right? So you try to dissociate and start to develop the sense of a witness. It is not that I am eating food, I am noticing that I am enjoying this food, right? So what in meditation it's called about the witness awareness. So you start to develop that. Then dharana is where you are taking an aid of an external thing to get your mind to focus on one thing. It can be a symbol, it can be a deity, it can be a chanting, but you try to get your mind to flow in one path and one path only with a little bit of effort. Then when you graduate to meditation or dhyana, you can't really translate some of the terms one-to-one in English, but the nearest to dhyana would be meditation. And in there, you are trying to get to a meditative state without putting an undue effort, without putting a lot of effort. So you're naturally able to pause your mind and achieve that meditative state. Again, all the preparation to do that, you can't just decide one day and say, okay, I'm going to meditate. If the preparation is not there, you will not be able to do it. You will have distractions. You will have the stresses and the strains, and that is talked about in the sutra.
When you talked about having a point of focus, it reminds me of the drishti.
Yes.
The point of focus. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So in dharana, which is the aided meditation, if you will, right? The focus can be, and even in the pranayama, the Patanjali Yoga Sutras talk about, the focus can be at the tip of your nose. It can be at in between your eyes or in between the eyebrows, or what is called the third eye. It can be on an object in front of you, like a symbol or a deity, right? It can be on a mantra. If you're closing your eyes, if you're chanting something internally, the focus can be that. And that is aided meditation, right? So you are taking the aid of some mechanism or a method, and you're trying to channel your awareness or your thought process either in the discovery path or just to calm it down and focus on that, right? Discovery as in contemplative discovery, right? People maybe a realization,
right?
Or just to get your mind to focus on one area where it's like, ultimate goal, what I'm told is, for a human being is self-realization. So towards that, you have to get that awareness. It is easy to, it's not easy. it can be challenging to grasp intellectually that you are the divine itself, or you are the supreme consciousness. But to get that from an intellectual level to an experiential level,
right,
I'm told it is very difficult. And to get to that level, meditation is the path. And you can use your chanting or a breath or a vision or a drishti to focus on an object, focus on a symbol, focus on a mantra. But at some later point in time, you would see that aid is no longer needed. You kind of move away from that. You are able to get to a meditative state without the aid. They say, for example, if you're chanting mantra for meditation, focus on the mantra for a long time. Once your practice is, and you will see your mind has wandered, it has, it started to think other things, you gently bring it back. But then when you are at a better practice, when you're only focusing on a mantra or a chanting, then they say, okay, focus on the silence between the mantras or the gap. So there is nothingness, right? So that's how the spiritual practice is supposed to progress.
Right. I love that kind of image of taking your focus from the something physical in the environment, or a sound, or a physical vibration, and then to move your focus to the space between, the silence between. That's just such a beautiful kind of philosophy to think of.
Yeah, thank you.
Can you talk a little bit about the chanting and the mantras? And oftentimes yoga class is begun with an Om, or where maybe the whole class will do an Om together. Can you talk about how that originates and why that is such a kind of common practice in yoga?
Yes, so Om is very interesting sound, right? You can think of it as composed of three separate sounds, the A, the U, and the Ma. In fact, in my classes and in many classes when we do pranayama, we do separate out those component chants and do those chanting with breath and with mudras and everything. But Om is said to be the pranama mantra, or the root chanting, which is supposed to represent the supreme consciousness or the divinity itself. So the components of it, when you break it down into kind of three vowels or three sounds, the A and the U and the Ma, A really comes up from the back of the throat or from the gut. U is a little bit more in the mouth, and Ma is towards the tongue. So,
right.
And if you look at most of the Indian languages, the way the letters are laid out, the alphabets, what I mean is, there are 5 families of alphabets, and the families are Ka really starts from the back of the throat, and the Ma, the last set of 5s, they're mostly towards the tip of the, our lips. Actually, lips have to touch each other to make the sound. So they kind of go up and down. So I'm told Om is an all-encompassing sound which represents divinity itself, and that is a sound that is universally practiced for yoga classes.
Yeah.
And again, from a mantra's point of view, different classes, different schools of yoga practice different mantras. Typically, it's customary to start something with a prayer, and the prayer could be, hey, we are embarking on an effort or a exercise where I want to learn from you, you want to learn from me, and let us both achieve progress. I mean, that's kind of one of the chanting, right? Sahana bhavatu, sahano bhunaktu, sahaviryam karavavahai, tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahai, om shanti shanti shanti. So that is one of the practices. Many schools use that, and I use that in my yoga class. There is one more chanting or one more mantra, which is again preparation, right? It's at the beginning, and that is about the sage Patanjali itself. So for the in honor of the sage Patanjali, there is a mantra. Yogena chittasya padena vacha malam sharirasya cha vaidyakena yopa karotum pravaram muninam patanjalim pranjalim liranatosmi. So that mantra essentially says that it addresses to the sage Patanjali and says that, hey, you have, again, there is theories, right, that he was a medicine man and also a grammarian. So it says, hey, you who has invented grammar or codified grammars, where you are a doctor and have helped with the benefit of health, and through yoga who has helped eliminate ills from the body. In honor of you, we salute you.
Right.
So that's kind of in the prayers it goes, right? To two things. But you asked the question about mantras during the meditation. So before we get there, let me take a little bit detour into pranayama itself. So for example, in pranayama, at least in my classes, the emphasis is on making the exhalation longer than inhalation. And to do that, I mean, nobody is sitting with their stop clock and measuring every breath, right?
Right.
So in your mind, you can use any chanting. I mean, if you want to be completely secular, you can say, okay, just do count, right? 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi type of count. Or you can use any mantra of your choice.
Right.
If you have a deity, you can definitely use the name of the deity, or salutations to deity ABC. You can definitely use a mantra like that, and make the number of chants of that during an inhalation. Let us say it is you are able to slow down the inhalation and chant a mantra 6 times. While exhaling, you try to chant the same mantra about 8 times. So you kind of maintain that ratio, right? So that's one way of doing it. And the mantra, again, it's supposed to help with dharana and also with dhyana, with meditation. And people might change it out. But if you have something that is favorite and that is people like one mantra or one vision or one image, or even a candlelight which you are focusing, that is good enough for a focus. So it's an aid, right? A tool is a tool. So you use whatever tool that is working for you to pursue the meditation practice.
Interesting. I think too, you kind of mentioned that, the different practitioners may want to have a more, as you said, secular practice where they're maybe not using the traditional chants. Or maybe they have a simple mantra like, I am breathing in and I am breathing out.
Yes.
I have heard in classes. And it is true that just having, I like how you said, the tool, the aid of focus, whatever this may be. This may be your own personal words, or even counting Mississippis as an example. Are there any recommendations that you have for people into maybe how they could choose a mantra for them, or if they, sometimes we're instructed at beginning of class to set an intention. Just any thoughts that you might have for people who maybe aren't quite sure what to use as an intention or as their mantra?
Yeah, so the intention is fairly powerful, right? Intention is not only for a class. For example, if you're doing any ritual like a puja or something, the first step is called sankalpa, or an intention, where you are declaring, to the cosmos that, hey, in such and such a cosmic time, in this yuga, in this year, in this such a month, such a week, such a day of the week, in this hour, in this minute, I am intending to, pursue this activity. So you set that intention. And also, for example, while one of the sankalpas is you specify the geography, but you don't start with, hey, in this town or in the city. You start in the cosmos. You say in the cosmos, in a galaxy, in the solar system that I'm in, on the surface of the earth, in this continent, in this country, in this state, in this, so you kind of coming all the way. So the setting an intention to a practice is very important. So at the beginning of a class, for example, if you're getting into yoga class and it is 1 hour or 1 hour 15 minutes or whatever time that you are going to spend, setting that intention can be very powerful. It can yield benefits in a very much significant level than you're coming in, maybe you're confused, you're coming from work, you're stressed out, whatever. You get into the practice, for example, an exercise, like heavily engaged exercise session, can be, you're just distracted, you're completely focused on that, and again you come back to whatever your stress is. But with a yoga practice, if you can set the intention and say, during the next duration of the class, I'm going to bring my awareness to the practice I'm doing, right? So in my yoga class, I try to hint at that to the students, that, hey, when you are stretching in a particular manner, for example, let's say take one asana, for example, I'm doing cobra pose. Just focus on your lower back, focus on your abdomen, focus on your neck, focus on the wrists where the weight, you're not really typically used to bearing the weight of the body on your wrists. In that pose you are, so focus on that so as to move your awareness to the practice and away from the other things. So setting that intention and saying that, hey, I'm going to be here and now, and I'm going to be mindful of that. That is the preparation. That is the asana, right? So asana and pranayama are supposed to help, people to be there, right there, be mindful of it, be aware that, hey, I'm doing this practice for my own spiritual upliftment. And, definitely the side benefit is you are away from the stresses and other things.
You spoke at the beginning about the cleansing benefits of yoga, which are maybe not as much seen in the Western practice, where we primarily focus on the asana and the pranayama. Can you talk more about, I guess, those cleansing philosophies and how maybe we could integrate more of that into our yoga practice here?
Yes. So cleansing techniques, there are multiple levels of cleansing techniques, right? And some involve little more infrastructure, for the lack of a better term, right? So, for example, in pranayama practices, you see, even in Austin area, and in my classes, we do practice a little bit of cleansing to expel the carbon dioxide out of the system to prepare for pranayama. So that's like one easy cleansing technique. Kapalabhati or Bhastrika, one of those techniques are used. But Bhastrika can also elevate one's blood pressure. So it's not, many teachers, don't try to address that unless they know the students and, their capabilities and their conditions. Some of the other cleansing techniques are Nauli, which is like cleansing of the digestive system. And it's a practice where you use different muscles and mudras and the posture to kind of rotate your intestine inside of the stomach, but you do it with your stomach muscles and abdominal muscles, right? It can be done in a class, but I've not seen that done in the US mostly. But other cleansing techniques, there are various different cleansing techniques in different schools of yoga. They involve a lot more infrastructure. For example, cleansing your nostrils and nasal passage. It can be done with a neti pot. Many people do it here, but they do it, in their homes or in retreats and things like that. And then there is a way of running a rubber catheter or rubber tube from your mouth to the nostril, right? Or from the nostril to the mouth, right? So again, to massage out the muscles inside the nostril, nasal passage, that involves a lot more infrastructure. You need access to water, you need sink, you need a lot more other facilities to be able to practice it, right? There are techniques which involve drinking a lot of saline water, and then you expel it out, but that involves a lot more infrastructure. So it's probably, my guess is it's just a infrastructure thing, and also people have to be prepared to go with the practice.
Right.
So that's one of the reasons probably it's not practiced as much.
Interesting. And then I think about in, for instance, the eagle pose, where you're kind of bringing constriction to different parts of the body. And then when you release the pose, there's an effect of cleansing or purging, maybe. Is that something that's common in a lot of the asanas? This idea of kind of creating constriction in the pose that then when released has that cleansing benefit?
I don't know if it is cleansing benefit, but definitely asanas are advised to be practiced in a complementary manner. For example, if you're doing a lot of constriction, you counter that with a different practice. You did a lot of forward bending, you do a little bit of backward bending. Again, to balance, right? And most of the asanas, the way they are laid out, they are self-complementary. You do right side and you do left side. So that to bring about the balance in the body. Because many of us, we may have a little bit of asymmetry in the body, and you don't want to perpetuate that, or you want to make sure that the practice provides that balance. So yes, so I don't know if it is focused on cleansing, but it's definitely focused on different muscles, different body parts, and then there is a complementary side to it. Once you get out of an asana or out of a posture, typically do the opposite one.
So thinking of this idea of the balance that you have between the different asanas, one of the other things that is quite common is the people will instruct to engage bandha or lock. Can you talk a little bit about what that means and what is the benefit?
Got it. So bandhas and mudras, right, they kind of go hand in hand, but bandhas are used mostly in some of the practices to affect certain, chakras or part of the kundalini. It kind of gets into kundalini side of the yoga practices. And for example, the Mooladhara Bandha, or it is for base, for your base. And then there are bandhas where you suck in your abdomen and tighten it for navel chakra, right? So they affect bandhas in that manner. In the sense, they start to activate your energy centers with specific way of doing neuromuscular locks. So they do have a lot of benefits. And mudras, which are like a different way, but mostly done with hands and the kind of symbols, right? They do provide awareness. I mean, maybe you are holding hand in a particular fashion. At a superficial level, you are aware that, hey, my thumb is touching my index finger, right? But at a neuromuscular level, specific things are getting activated, and you are activating, like for example, when you do Chin Mudra and when you're chanting, we're kind of going back to our discussion about Om, and when you're decomposing Om into three components and talking and chanting Akar, the mudras do have their own benefit in perceiving those vibrations. When you're chanting and when you apply a mudra, you are able to perceive the chant, or the vibrations in your leg region, or even your chest region, or in your head region, more what would I say, more appropriately, or more, you may see a vibration differently between mudra practices. And also, for example, I don't know the name of it, but while chanting a makar or a ma, you can do it normally, or you can even take the tip of your tongue and touch to the palate, and you will see a significant difference in the type of vibrations in your head region. When you are perceiving, you will notice the difference.
Wow. And then in general, the original Sanskrit names of the different asanas, those have the same, vibrational effects, so to speak. So the name is not arbitrary, but
Yes.
that the Sanskrit name of the pose, that when you say it, it also helps to feel the vibration or conduct the vibration.
Yes. So there are two sides to that. Very good question. So there is a many asanas where the names are pure descriptive names of the asanas. But there are also what are known as Bija Mantras or mantras. So for example, with Surya Namaskar, the sun salutation, in my class I do employ, at the beginning of each round, I do employ a mantra, and it starts with a particular chant, a combination of a vowel and a consonant sound, plus a name of the sun god. And that Bija Mantra is supposed to help with a practice, right? It is again, the vibrations are also supposed to help. And in my own practice, I really didn't pay much attention to vibrations for a long time. Only when I was a student in Boston, when I was undergoing this teacher training course, that's when I started to really see the difference. Okay, I can perceive vibrations in my chest region and my head region and, and whatever. Oh, there is really, a credibility to it. But it's fairly difficult to perceive it. It's not very easy to find it because you are not, one may not be as prepared as one should be, right? For example, if you are just beginning in the practice, you may not see the vibrations, you may not see the benefit of the vibrations because you get more subtle and subtle and subtle in your practice as you make progress versus you're doing it purely as a physical exercise. You may not be perceiving much of the vibrations and also may not be reaping the benefits of the vibrations.
And, this term awareness comes to mind, as you engage in the practice and explore and revisit the postures or revisit the different flows or sequences of asanas regularly, your awareness, your ability to notice those different things starts to change.
Definitely.
And then even your awareness when you're not on your yoga mat, that maybe you start to notice things like your posture or, one of the big things for me, I hear this, oftentimes in yoga class, to relax your face, smile, relax your eyebrows, because you notice that when you're highly concentrated on something and focused, oftentimes the brow is furrowing or the jaw is clenching. And of course that, again, not only on the yoga mat, but then in your life as well. So as you continue this practice of yoga and your awareness grows even more, that now I notice a lot. I notice if I'm frowning or I notice if I'm just kind of have this stress on my face. And so I think about that too, that, as you're talking about your own experience through this practice, that maybe in the beginning it was hard to even observe that there was a strong physical sensation that accompanied doing the chanting or a reason behind, doing the Om at the beginning of class, that your own awareness transforms so much over time.
Right. I mean, I used to do pretty much the same practice, right? The certification I got is from the same institution where I was going to learn yoga as a high school kid, right? The same institution, same set of practices, but my practice at a much later stage was different than when I was doing as a high school kid. Because there I was not really, I did not have the theoretical understanding of it at the time. And it was very physical, and I used to just do the exercises, and get out of the class.
Right.
But as I progressed, I did see that difference, my own perception of vibrations, during the chanting and during the different mudras have different effect. And that, and then once in a while when I read back the sutras and there is a correlation here. It's not a random science. It is either one person's, infinite wisdom that has been condensed here, or a lot of people who have put in a lot of time in their contemplative state and have devised these techniques, and then one sage or one person has condensed all that wisdom into a very dense compendium or syllabus. So.
If you were to, kind of speaking to our audience, and I think people will have a varying experience of yoga. Maybe some of our listeners have been practicing for many years. Maybe some of our listeners are more new to yoga. What would you say are, maybe the common obstacles that people may experience in a yoga practice, and what you would advise to them to maybe help them through those obstacles?
Yeah, so The obvious things are physical, right? You need to have the time, the resources to get to a class and being able to do it, right? And any injury and medical state that may prevent you from practicing, those are very obvious obstacles. The next level is limiting the practice to physical only, right? Or putting a mental block and saying that, hey, this is a physical practice and I'm doing it for this benefit. Nothing wrong with that, but that is not the full picture, right? So it's a path to a spiritual journey, and having that awareness probably would be very good. And say that, okay, I'm doing this not only as a means to better myself in terms of my physical body or keeping away diseases or whatever, but also it's a method to improve my spiritual awareness and pursue whatever spiritual path it is. Whether it is not like, I'm not talking about in the terms of Hinduism or a particular philosophy or school of thought or philosophy. It can be whatever be one's spiritual pursuit, but using yoga as a tool would really make it better. So I wouldn't say it's like your question was most on the obstacle side, but I would turn it around and say, use it as a stepping stone, or a tool to improve your practice, and if when you see that in that light, you will find ways to overcome your obstacles.
I love that answer.
Thank you.
I think that so much of maybe our frustration on the mat, or our feeling, maybe just the perception of an obstacle, that maybe someone is struggling with a certain asana or with a certain expression that they're wanting to show, that a lot of times it's maybe not a physical limitation, a physical obstacle, but the mental obstacle or just perception of an obstacle that's stopping you from being able to move deeper into a pose or something like this.
Yes.
And how much that is maybe a mirror for our lives, that we, perceive these different things in our lives as obstacles and sources of frustration. But the more that we learn, maybe from our yoga practice, how, like you're just saying, to not focus on the obstacle, to see that what we're doing is a path toward improving ourselves and achieving, whether you want to have that more spiritual side, or whether you want to have the more secular side, that I'm just achieving my own highest potential and my own happiness and contentedness.
You nailed it. You captured it very well. Again, so from a asana, kind of where we touched upon earlier in the talk, we talked about how the sage Patanjali focuses about 3 sutras out of the 196 for asanas, right? So asana is not getting that posture like everybody else in the class or like your teacher. It is, what is it for you, right? If you are getting the benefit of an asana and you are able to get your awareness to the practice and say, okay, hey, I am seeing an increased weight on my wrist, for example, or I'm bending over in this way and I'm engaging my calf muscles, which I had not engaged usually during my walking. If you can get that, that is probably better or a more beneficial than actually getting the pose to look like somebody else's practice. Somebody else may have a better, more flexible body, or they may be more athletic, or it's each person is different, right? So individualizing that practice and being happy, or one of the niyamas says santosha, right? It's being content. Hey, I am doing this practice to the best of my ability, this posture, and I am reaping the benefit. So getting that mindset, tuning that mindset is probably more important than actually, having a posture that looks like your neighbor.
At the very beginning, you had said something about finding, I think it was like finding stability in the pose is the ultimate goal.
Yes.
So however you modify or use maybe a prop or something to help you become comfortable.
Yes.
So the goal is not to make, as you said, make my body look the way that my neighbor's body or this person does, but to find my own comfort in the pose.
Comfort and stability. So
stability.
The sutra is Stiram Sukham Asanam, 3 words. What is stable and what is comfortable is a posture. That's all the definition is of an asana. And that's eventually when the actual asanas, there are like hundreds of asanas. Different schools of yoga have invented a whole lot of asanas based on various different engaging different body parts, different benefits. Each asana has a lot of benefits, definitely, right? No doubt about it. But looking at an asana in that context helps you. As in, hey, I'm not doing it just to look like this, just to get my body in this posture. That is a part of the goal, but the majority of part of the goal is, am I getting my mind to be aware of what I'm doing? Am I being mindful about it? And am I getting the benefit of the practice, right? If I'm balancing, or if I'm, doing a downward dog and engaging my calf muscles, or a side angle pose, Parshvakonasana, and engaging the calf muscles, the ankles, and my thigh muscles, I engage my thigh muscles differently than somebody else, and they may get more deeper into the pose. They may be able to bend lower. Somebody else may not be, but that is not the goal of the practice. The goal of the practice is, hey, am I getting the benefit right now? So again, bringing your awareness back to the practice is in my opinion, I think that's a better way to think about the asanas and the practices.
And then, do you have any closing thoughts that you would want to share?
Well, obviously, one thing. Thanks for for this talk and this opportunity to talk about it. And in closing, what I can say is, think of yoga as a means of spiritual or asana practices and pranayama practices as a means or a tools for spiritual growth, and not just as a physical set of exercises for physical benefit. There is nothing wrong with that. Definitely there is benefit, and one can stop at that benefit, but it is more than that. And if you can think about that in that manner, that will be great benefit.
Right. And just maybe opening yourself to things that maybe you aren't really aware of that could be there. Thinking back when you were a teenager practicing yoga, you didn't necessarily know that there is so much that you're not seeing.
Oh yeah, obviously.
So
obviously, I did not know.
Yeah, kind of this element that as you open yourself to maybe new things that you are not even expecting to be there, and just being very open-minded, which on its own is maybe a practice that we should try to engage in more in our lives. I want to thank you so much for joining me here on the podcast. I would love to have you back again to continue our conversation.
Thanks for inviting me. And one thing I have to emphasize, maybe I did it multiple times, this is not just my thoughts and my inputs or something, right? It is wisdom has been there for thousands of years, and many people have spent a lot more time and effort and thought on understanding this. I'm only describing like a part of it, a very small part of it.
Right. Well, I thank you so much for sharing this with us, and I look forward to having you again on the program.
Thank you.
Definitely. I want to thank all of you for tuning in to the podcast. I truly hope that you have learned something here today and are maybe encouraged to join us on the mat for yoga class, or even visit Chandra. We will include that link for you in the description of this podcast. I want to thank all of you so much for listening and wish you a very, very happy rest of your day. Come back and join us again soon.
We're the only country in the world that separates the mind from the body. Yeah, the only country.
I'm joined today by Athena Jezik, Ed Norden,
Robert Gardner,
Dr. Paula Bruno.
The body has a natural ability and tendency to want to heal.
It doesn't have to be complicated or costly.
I can talk science. Yeah, we'll talk science for sure.
You do often need to supplement with magnesium. Unbalanced life.
Vitally important to make sure that the entire system is opened up.
Actually, happiness and suffering are states of mind. They're not external things.
Do you have any recommendations for our listeners?
Use a tennis ball.
Vinyasa or hatha yoga.
Try a HIIT workout. You only got to do 20 minutes.
Every day, having a practice for yourself.
We're not powerless,
right,
to improve our situation.
Welcome to the Wellness Plus podcast.
Introducing Yoga Plus, offering a free series every month with over 300 different videos. Take control of your health. Work out anytime, anywhere. Yoga Plus. Download now for free.